Back in the day, it was backup battery or bust for using a cordless phone when the power's out, unless it was a cordless system that allowed you to use the base as a standard corded phone when the power's out by using line power. In 2011, Panasonic introduced the coolest power backup implementation. In late 2012, I was thinking to myself, the base can charge the handset, of course. Why can't the handset power the base? It would just make sense. Little did I know that Panasonic had introduced just that. Place on base power backup. Let's take a look at the feature. So we're going to unplug the base to simulate the power going out. The handset does not begin powering the base immediately, and I believe this is so that placing the handset on charge would not accidentally cause the handset to try to power the base while it's also plugged in, which may cause damage because if you supply too much power to an electronic, you can blow it out or something. On Panasonic phones, you can turn the feature on and off on each handset by pressing menu pound 152 or menu settings or initial setting power failure. Auto turns it on or off turns it off, and it's called auto because after 1 minute of being out of range, base no power press off on 2011 to 2016 handsets or power outage press off on 2017 and later handsets displays. Now we just waited about a minute, and here we go. The message is now displayed. This, I believe, is done so that if you place the handset on the base, if you're just transporting or storing it or whatever, the handset will not try to power the base. This way, the power is preserved. Then when you're ready to use power backup, press off. Now it's saying place on base to supply power to base. So we're going to do that. We'll place the handset on the base, and you can place it either way because of that cool contact design. Now the handset's powering the base. However, the base is not fully featured. The buttons don't work, and the answering system, automated call block, and Bluetooth doesn't work. And you have to use speakerphone if you're using the power supplying handset. So if you press talk, it just goes on speakerphone. So let's call my system's echo test. Hello. I'm talking to myself on power backup mode. Other handsets appear as normal, as you can see, and you can use those on talk mode. Oh, you just had a feedback freak show. So let's hang up here. So you can see other handsets work as normal, while the handset placed on the base is asking me to not pick it up, and this is very important. Because listen to what's going to happen to the dial tone once I pick it up. Oh, I didn't even have to pick it up. Me just touching it caused it to lose connection. The base now does not have power anymore. A cool touch Panasonic has in their implementation is that you can dial before placing the handset on the base. So we're going to call the echo test again, and now I'm going to place the handset on the base. The soft keys will disappear because all the keys except off are locked. Then the key tone sounds if it's turned on, and the call begins.
You are about to enter an echo test. In this mode,
now if the base is plugged in, the call will continue. So let's do that now. Don't pick up, then disappears. And now the handset is charging. However, it does not tell you that it's charging. This handset and all 2013 and later handsets do not have a charge indicator. 2012, actually, even though those still had a message light, regardless of whether they were senior-friendly handsets or not. But even on handsets with a charge indicator, it won't light up. You can still dial while the handset is charging. So I'm going to press pound to end this echo test.
The echo test has been completed.
Now when we hang up, the base is going to reboot. and the handset will begin charging. On 2011 to 2016 models, pressing off wouldn't immediately cause the handset to unlink. It would hang it up and basically boot, but the handset would be stuck, and in only a few seconds would it detect out of range and actually say it's charging. The reason the base has to reboot is because on power backup mode, not all the features were available, and it has to bring those back. As you can see, automated call block and everything is back again. Once again, the handset does not begin powering the base immediately when the power is disconnected. As you can hear, the dial tone on the second handset stopped as soon as the base was unplugged. And because of this, the time is not kept by power backup. However, the time is kept. On a phone where the handset displays the time, the handset backs it up, and then when the base turns back on and the handset comes in range, the time is sent out to the base. On Panasonic phones, for some reason, handset 1 is the only handset that can do this. But nonetheless, it does have time backup, and as you can see, the time is now here again, even though the base was unpowered for about 10 seconds despite the handset being on it. The manual says that you should have 2 handsets or more to use the phone book or caller list during a power failure. However, that is not true. You are able to. And yes, there is a number ending in 8675309 that plays that song. I believe they just say that because again, if the handset moves the slightest, there's a possibility it could come disconnected. And the reason it's an issue is because this has a shared phone book. All the Panasonic US models with power backup have a shared phone book.
It's 6 o'clock.
In other markets, they might have a handset phone book, but shared caller list. So on those models, you can do what I showed with pre-dialing with the handset phone book, and you can also do this with the redial list as well. On other handsets, obviously, things work normally. What is correct, however, is that on the Panasonic version of the feature, caller ID is not displayed on the handset powering the base. So as you can see, this handset is showing caller ID, but this handset does not. That's because they really want to make sure you do not pick up the handset and stop the power. Talking caller ID is also not available during power backup, and I believe that's because the voice is generated by the base and transmitted to all the handsets. And I guess manufacturers thought it would take more power to do that, but I don't really see why. In 2025, you'd think they'd have the technology to. And by the way, Panasonic's latest is this one, the 994SK from 2021, which is currently their latest flagship model if you want power backup and a whole lot of other features. Now let's take a look at what it looks like on a message counter base, a color display handset, and then we'll take a look at the AT&T version of the feature. By the way, when a Panasonic base reboots, the time is not lost. So if the base is on when it's rebooting, or if it's off for like a fraction of a second, this depends on the model. The few seconds you can have it unplugged for depends on the model without losing the time. You can see the time is still there, and the base does not beep when this happens, compared to when it boots up normally, where the time's lost and the display shows all its pixels to test it. Here's the 274, and now we're going to place its handset into the base. The message counter flashes 88, and I'm not sure if that was introduced with this model or if the 2011 KXTG 6631 series did this too, or the 2012 67 series or other models with power backup in foreign markets. The 47 series here in the US did not have power backup, which was strange. 2014 was therefore the first year where Panasonic sold a non-dialing base with power backup here in the US, and our home phone is one of those. Because like I mentioned before, it's just this without the base keypad. That's the only difference between this and the 885SK implementation, the fact that the base does show something while it's booting up. This was the only US color display model with power backup, Panasonic one. And I think period so far in the US with power backup mode. The Panasonic KXTGH263. The handset's out of range. And now if you've seen the deregistration display on these handsets before, where it shows the prompt to put it on the base after holding locator, over the wallpaper you may think that's how the power backup messages appear. However, that is not the case. As you can see, they completely take over the wallpaper. And you can see it works exactly the same. However, there is an important difference that's specific to the color display models, and that is the fact that the handset will not go into screensaver mode while it's powering the base. The most it'll do is the backlight will dim. So there are 3 states of backlight brightness. There's bright with the keys lit, dim with the keys not lit, or extra dim while the handset's charging. And that extra dim is what it'll do when the handset is powering the base. This way you can still see that it prompts you to not pick it up. And then everything else works the same way. This being a larger display, don't pick up does not take over the call timer. Now let's take a look at the AT&T version, and this is very cool. AT&T introduced their version in 2013 with the CLP99X83 series, which was the first CLP model. Then they introduced it to the CL series in 2015. This is a 2017 model. On an AT&T handset, it immediately begins prompting you to place it in the base. Oh, I keep hitting that button. And by the way, on Panasonic handsets, for some reason, when you first insert the batteries, power backup is not available immediately. You have to manually turn it on, menu pound 152, save to force it to start, or just wait about a minute or so, and then it'll start. So now I'm going to place the handset on the base. The in-use light flashes, and then very faintly, in some light you can see this, the set date prompt will flash too. Now the handset says powering base, don't pick up. Now, unlike the Panasonic phones, this is a very major difference. You can see that it still said answer on, even though the base does not work. It's still true that the answering system can't be used during a power failure. However, the menus are still there, and that's because on AT&T phones, the menus do not refresh during power backup mode. The menus that are offered by the registered base are always displayed, even if the handset reboots or anything, and the menus are disabled when out of range. Once again, you're locked to speakerphone mode. And unlike the Panasonic phones, you actually hear an error tone if you try to switch off of speakerphone. But by far the best feature of the AT&T version of power backup is that when we plug the base back in, watch the base display as I now plug it in. Look at that. The base comes right back to full functionality. It does not need to reboot. And look, I could use the answering system even though I'm still on a call I started with power backup. However, a drawback is that the handset keys are now locked. As you can see, it makes obvious that it's charging. It's still on speakerphone, and the keys are locked. But you can see that it's charging, so now you know it's safe to pick it up. Also, if you see that the base comes back on. If you're using another handset Oh, of course, if you're using another handset, that's already off the base. Duh. Okay, so let's take a look, actually, at another advantage of the AT&T one. And this is why Ans On disappeared after a few seconds. That's because the base tells the handsets that it's running in power outage mode. On a dot matrix display, it'll say battery backup mode, but on these ones, these traditional ones, it'll only say PWR outage mode. As you can see here, and then Ans On disappears. Once again, all the menus are available, however, they cannot actually be used. Let's demonstrate the fact that the base comes right back to life right away by starting a transfer call to the base. So we're going to transfer the call to the base. Now we're going to plug the base back in. And just like that, it's now transferred the call to the base. So what you heard there is when I answered it, I had put a Pat Fleet permanent signal recording onto my system. You can do all sorts of things with free PBX. It is by far the best update I've done to my phone setup. Now we're going to plug the base in while we're trying to have the second handset access the answering system, which right now is not available. And look at that. The answering system is available right away. As you can see, this handset is still on the call that I started on power backup mode. The base came right back to life, and therefore this handset was able to access the answering system. So now you can do everything you'd expect. On this version of the CR83207, Smart Call Blocker works during a power failure, but it's very flaky. Now, I'm not sure when this was, but later models have then removed that ability, and in fact, all call blocking. So, the 2017 models, or more specifically, possibly the early versions of this one, were the last where call block works during a power failure. On the 2015s, it doesn't, the dialing base 2015 doesn't have the smart call blocker yet, but they did add it to the corded, cordless, and the non-dialing base, which don't have place-on-base power backup. It just has the regular call block, which plays a busy tone when locked. So now, of course, you can pick the handset up and put it back. And that is a look at the very cool place-on-base power backup feature. Unfortunately, AT&T has not included it on any models since the CRH3519 released in 2019. However, this model and that model are still available. Not in stores, but you can get them online. And if you really want power backup on something you can buy in a store, there's the Panasonic models, and Panasonic is my go-to phone anyways, even though AT&T has the coolest implementation of power backup as far as power returning behavior goes. It's also important to note that AT&T and Vtech do not have the ability to turn power backup on or off. And it does not have the 1-minute timeout prompting you to press off before putting it on the base. They handle no power for extended periods differently. What they do instead is powering base don't pick up disappears if it has not detected actual power in the base, actual complete circuit on the charge contacts for about 10 seconds. So like, even if the handset is not linked up to the base yet, every time you tap the handset to the base, the timer resets and it'll continue saying powering base don't pick up. But if you leave it off for 10 seconds, it goes back to saying put HS on base to power base. On Panasonic, you can know it has power backup if you see power failure after registration and before change language in the initial setting or now settings menu. However, on an AT&T or Vtech phone, unless the handset has no link to the base, you won't know the phone has power backup mode until those messages start appearing, or if you read the manual. I forgot to mention that on AT&T's version of the feature, the handset does not prompt you to not pick it up while you're on the phone or when a call comes in. This is very important. So if we have a call come in here, and here's that flaky version of Smart Call Blocker working. So you can see here, Smart Call Blocker did work. Again, it's not available on newer models with power backup. And for good reason, because it wasn't supposed to be that way, and it's very flaky, although it managed to work this time. And you can see it did not display don't pick up. Caller ID did work. Let's actually look at this again without Smart Call Blocker.
Call from live.
So as you can see, it showed the caller ID, and don't pick up was not shown. This means you might be likely to make the mistake of picking up the phone to answer it. Of course, it's on the base, but the charge light's not on, and the base is not lit up, and in a real scenario, your lights wouldn't be on. So you might still be aware that it's powering the base. But again, it's best that you use the other handsets.